Thanks everybody for joining us for the Trade Show Simplified webinar. Today is going to be our opportunity to go through a lot of at least my personal experiences with some things that you can do to work a trade show and be successful as you go through working these trade shows. There's going to be a lot of different content that I'm going to focus on covering at first. If people have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. As we get towards the end of the session, I'm going to make sure I open things up to Q&A and we can talk about anything and everything during that block. So I think the first thing that I just want to cover if I think about trade shows is why should you be going to trade shows? So one of the things that everyone will come to experience as you grow in this business is you want to explore different ways to build your business and have different pillars that help support you in the long term. And for me, I think trade shows have been the most effective way for me to develop wholesale relationships. There's a lot of things that are really great about wholesale, but the few in particular that I really like are, first off, it's a quantity game. They want you to buy as many things as you can from them. If you bought things RA or OA, that might not always be your experience. Wholesalers traditionally want you to get as much stuff as you can, and in many cases, doing so will allow you to save money and put yourself in a better position to be competitive on those items. Another thing that I really like about trade shows is it provides you the opportunity to develop relationships, not only with vendors, but with other sellers. So my business and everyone else's business here is going to progress and go through different stages. As I've decided to make a big push into the wholesale market, I know that I don't know everything that there is to know about this world, and I want to learn from other sellers, and I want to build the relationships with vendors so that I can be successful in growing this arm of my business. I think that the other thing that's really important about trade shows in particular is right now there's a huge proliferation of new third-party Amazon sellers that are getting into the marketplace. As these sellers are coming into the market, they're exploring all different sourcing methods, and one of them is building this wholesale arm. You should be going to trade shows now because what will happen with many of these companies is once you establish an account and you build a relationship with them, you have an opportunity to leverage that relationship for as long as you want to be in this business. But the longer that you wait, the more people may have approached these wholesalers, and some wholesalers now are saying, I've already got enough people that are selling my product on Amazon. I don't want to cultivate any new relationships until some of them slow down. So, trade shows I think are a very, very interesting opportunity, especially if you're looking to grow into the wholesale side of the house. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that everyone should be doing to get ready for a trade show. So one of the first things that's really important is getting all of your business documents and your house in order. So really, I think there are 4 things that are really important in this vein. You're going to have whatever is your critical business sort of information. So, you'll probably have a DBA or an EIN. You need to have copies of those pieces of information, in particular if you've never been to a trade show or a wholesale show in advance. You're going to want to have a copy of your sales tax exemption because you don't want to be paying sales tax, of course, on any of these items. You're going to want to get some business cards for yourself. When you do get business cards, I don't recommend that you put yourself in as the CEO of your company. This is one of those things that I picked up from learning about private label, but you want to create the illusion that you have a very important voice in the decision-making process as it relates to purchasing items for your business. But you don't want them to think that you're the last person in line to purchase for your business. So, you could be something like senior purchasing director or senior buyer. something to that effect. But you want to have some business cards that people can take back and they can reference. If you have a website, now is a really great time to get that going and make sure that it's working. Even if you don't have a website, I encourage folks to at least set up a little skeleton that will redirect to your Amazon storefront, because in most cases, if you're selling all of your products on Amazon, you don't want to be listing Amazon as your direct website. Let's say your company's ABC company, people can go to that URL and you can redirect them over to your Amazon website. The last thing that's important in terms of getting your house in order is, depending on the types of shows that you're going to, in some instances you're going to need invoices from other wholesalers. Many times they'll say, I need to have 2 or 3 trade references, is the term that's kind of thrown around, before I'm even willing to do business with you. So don't worry, every show isn't like that, but if you're exploring a show that is like that, obviously you need to have those things in hand and ready so that when you go to the show, you're not experiencing any hiccups. Another thing that I think is really important in terms of getting ready for the show is, when you sign up for a lot of these shows, what they're going to do is they will give you access to their entire vendor list before you're actually in attendance for the show. You're going to find there are some really big shows that last multiple days. There are some smaller shows that are only one day. But in either case, if you haven't been to one of these before, they can be a little bit overwhelming. And you kind of don't know where you're going to want to start unless you take a little time in advance to say, who are the different companies that are going to be at the show? Have I had success selling any brands or styles for any of these companies beforehand? Or do I really want to explore building a relationship with this other type of company? So do a little bit of homework before you actually get to the show. You don't have to have everything all set in gear and ready to go beforehand, but you do want to have some idea if there's 3 to 5 vendors that are really important to you, that you're spending the time and investing in figuring out where their booth is and going to hit them up first and maybe going back to visit them a little later after you kind of get some of your ducks in a row. Another thing I think that's important as you start to think about getting ready for a show is understand that there's a lot of different opportunities for you to get exposed to trade shows in the wholesale market. You're going to find that there are the mega shows. The best example of this is ASD, which happens out in Las Vegas. This tends to happen twice a year. It's, I think, in the February timeframe and in the August timeframe. The great thing about these massive mega shows is they cover so many different product categories, and there are so many different vendors there, from the really established groups to really small players who are just looking to enter the marketplace. I also recommend to folks, depending on where you live, it's always easier if you don't have to spend a lot of money getting to a show, staying at a hotel. So if you're close to an urban center, you're within 3 hours driving distance of an urban center, try and figure out if there's actually going to be any wholesale shows in your market. And that way you're not going to have to invest quite as much just getting there and paying for room and board and food and all those other things that come along with a trip that's halfway across the country. The last thing that I'll recommend in terms of types of shows is just being sensitive to, aside from these mega shows, there's a lot of small niche specific shows. And this has been really the avenue that I've loved exploring in 2016 because I'm really trying to make a specific push into shoe and clothing markets to grow that piece of my portfolio. So there's a ton of niche specific shows, and there's going to be things in home, in kitchen, in toys. Understand that if you want to build into those product markets, you might need to explore some of those category-specific types of shows. One last thing in terms of the shows that you're going to experience, you'll experience sometimes opportunities to go to closeout shows. So let's take a minute and talk about the distinction between purchasing items just generically wholesale versus purchasing closeout items. So wholesale items are And the same thing with closeout items. They're all going to typically be associated with one particular brand or a family of different products underneath some sort of parent brand. When you're buying items just wholesale, this is typically going to be something that vendor is going to be carrying for a long period of time. So I can buy them today. If they do well, I can replenish again in 30 days. If they continue to go well, I can buy more and more and more. Closeouts, on the other hand, in many cases are limited quantities available or limited quantities available at a given price. We'll come back to why understanding the opportunity with closeouts is going to become important for everyone, especially as you're starting to cultivate relationships with vendors, because one of my favorite things to do is you can talk someone into selling you a closeout, and once you've built a business relationship with them, you can segue and parlay that into a more robust relationship where now you're working on purchasing their regular wholesale types of items. So obviously there's a lot going on in terms of the show. So let's talk a little bit about now, okay, you've got all your ducks in order. You've done a little bit of homework to understand who's going to be at this show, maybe what categories are you looking to focus on during this show. So now what are some of the things that you're going to want to think about as you get in there and you work a show? So if you haven't been to one, the first thing I recommend that you do is just walk around. It's going to feel a little bit overwhelming at first, especially if you go to one of these huge shows. I'm fortunate that I've done this for my day job for quite some time, so I already have a really good gauge on how I feel out of a market in a wholesale trade show. But even as I started to do this for my FBA business, you want to spend a little bit of time getting your bearings, and you want to know where the opportunities may lie. And what I like to do is I'll spend the first half an hour that I'm at a show just kind of figuring out where people are at, and I'm making a little game plan in my head, because you're going to have a limited amount of time to work with, and you really want to focus your efforts on the places where you think there are the greatest opportunities. So you do that really just by walking around, and you're looking at the names of all of these different booths. As you start to kind of develop that game plan in your head, then you want to think about what's the best way for me to go through and start to assess what might be some of the product opportunities at these shows. So where you'll see a lot of something like ASD is there's an opportunity for you to just go ahead and scan these items. Heads up, everybody doesn't love you scanning everything. So if you can be a little bit more limited instead of trying to scan through someone's entire trade show booth, I find that people are a little bit more receptive to that. Before I really go and I start with scanning, I want to start by talking to someone and introducing myself to them. Relationship cultivation is a very important part of getting into the trade show and the wholesale market in the long term. And if I already know you, I'm much more apt to let you scan through my whole catalog of products versus if you're just someone who came up, didn't even take the time to introduce themselves and started scanning everything. Certain other types of categories. So for me, like I said, I'm trying to do a lot with clothing and shoes these days. Scanning actually isn't the best method, I think, to identify opportunities in those markets. So what I tend to do, since I want to focus on clothing and shoes, is I literally just use my Amazon app, like Amazon buying app on my phone, and I'll type in a brand name, right? Because as all of us are very sensitive to as Amazon sellers, we're typically trying to buy things that have a history of success and a track record of us being able to turn a certain amount of inventory, which we tease out through sales rank, and make a certain level of profit, which we really are basing on our historical pricing. But when you go to these wholesale shows, you're going to find that people can be carrying hundreds, if not thousands, of different items at different points in time. And you want to have a little bit more direction. And just by looking in your app, a lot of times you can get a real good flavor for, okay, here are some of the more popular items, or at least the things that I'm seeing listings popping up for already on Amazon. If something doesn't have a listing on Amazon, it doesn't mean that it's dead to you and there isn't a product opportunity there. but it does mean if you want to be successful with it, you're going to have to put in a little bit more work. It's going to be more analogous to something like a private label or a bundle where you're going to have to create a listing. You may have to use a tool like Merchant Works to identify what are the keywords you want to have associated with that item. You might have to do something like pay-per-click to drive traffic to your particular product offering that's new to the Amazon space. But in any case, you want to take a little time and try and, after you've already filtered out, these are the vendors I want to focus on. Of all of their stock, what are the things that I want to be focusing on? Another really important thing to remember is, and this will depend a lot on the category, every category isn't as brand sensitive as the others. And what I mean is, since we're really concerned with the rank, if I look at things in the toy market, for example, there's a very established rank hierarchy and a lot of big vendor players in the space. New people who are looking to bring products to the toy market a lot of times have a tough time emerging as one of the lead competitors. Now, if you contrast that to things in the home market or kitchen or clothing and shoes, I've found things that have very high velocity listings with some brand names I've never even heard of before. So, don't always feel like you have to know a brand at walking into a trade show to be able to make money on that brand. At the crux of it is identifying if these listings are popular already on Amazon. Are they selling well? Are the prices holding? And then, you really want to start to go through some of these different questions that become really important to help you tease out where the true product opportunities lie. So before we dive into some of those questions, I think just in terms of how you approach a vendor and some of the things that I myself like to disclose, I tell everybody that I sell on Amazon. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in this space still. Remember, there's a lot more third-party sellers that are looking to get into wholesale. So for some people, when you say I'm an Amazon seller, it could turn them off. Don't be discouraged. That doesn't always mean that it's a deal breaker. We're going to talk a little bit later about some of the things that you can do to get a hesitant vendor to yes. But I do think you want to be upfront and you want to tell them that I'm looking to sell these products on the Amazon marketplace. If you do have a brick and mortar store, I will say a lot more opportunities will be available to you. There's a lot of overhead and other things that come with a brick and mortar retailer that I don't have one today. Maybe some of you guys are lucky enough to. If you do, you will find that there's a lot more people that are willing to talk to you as it relates to some of this wholesale stuff. But even in those cases, I would still say I have a brick and mortar, but I'm also planning on selling some of these through e-commerce mediums. You don't need to be specific always that it is Amazon, but since 99.9% of my traffic is coming through Amazon, I'm upfront and I tell them that I'm selling on Amazon. Since you have the opportunity to interact with these people face-to-face, I think when you approach them, you drop your card on them, but try and build a little bit of a relationship with them. How's your day going? I love to get some laughs going, and I don't always dive right into the business. That is one of the hugest benefits of actually doing this through a trade show, is someone gets an opportunity to you instead of just an email or try and engage what's going on with you through a phone call. So cultivate a little bit of camaraderie. You don't need to talk for 15 or 20 minutes with them about product specific stuff, but take a few minutes to try and let them know a little bit about what you are and the type of person that you are. And then start to focus a little bit on some of the things that you're going to want to really talk about as it relates to their product specifically. So let's talk a little bit now about some of the things that you really want to be asking vendors to help you understand where might the opportunities lie. The two questions that I always ask vendors first are, number one, do you sell directly on Amazon yourself? if they're selling directly on Amazon, chances are it's going to be difficult for you to compete against them. They have obviously a much lower supply cost than you're going to have since you're purchasing items directly from them via wholesale. And I tend to, because I believe that there's still a whole lot of opportunity here, shy away from those types of sales to begin with. The other thing that I'm always concerned about is, are they selling to Amazon directly? If they're selling directly to Amazon, Amazon, much like the vendor themselves, is going to be buying these products at quantities and have the ability to really drive down the price should they want to. And it's just in your best interest, I think, not to be competing with Amazon, particularly on wholesale listings. I'm a little bit more open to competing with Amazon with OA, RA, or AZ flips, but that's because I'm not buying 100 of a particular SKU. The larger your quantity goes, the more sensitive you want to be to the level of competition that you're going to experience. And are you competing with another third-party seller, or are you competing with a large conglomerate or corporation? Easiest way to kind of tease some of that out in case people don't know, obviously you can see the store name. Amazon is very straightforward, but the number of reviews that someone has, someone with 6,000 reviews, running a pretty big business, I'm telling you, that's for sure. After you kind of have culled out those two things, they're not selling directly on Amazon, they aren't selling directly to Amazon. Now you want to dig a little bit deeper and you want to understand what are some of the things that might be opportunities for you. So I always like to ask then, tell me a little bit about some of your most popular items. That they're going to direct you to those things. A lot of times they have certain promos around some of their items that are more popular, and you want to have this ability to kind of pre-filter again what are the items that you're going to want to take some time to focus on. You're going to ask them if any of their items are on promo right now. Sometimes certain things are going to be selling for a lower price for whatever the reason may be. Maybe it's coming to the end of their spring, summer selling season, but for us, I can still buy sandals and feel comfortable that I'm going to sell through them by the month of August or September. You want to talk with them a little bit about if they offer some business-specific questions. Right? So do you offer terms? So terms is this concept which basically is analogous to them extending you a line of credit. I'm going to give you a certain amount of product, and I'm going to tell you that I need you to pay me back within net 30, which basically means within 30 days, net 60. See what the options are that are available. I normally don't recommend people start with net terms, but it is one of the effective ways that you can help leverage some time so that you can sell through some of your products and not be required to front this money at the beginning. You want to ask them if they have discounts for certain purchase quantities. This, in my experience, is a tough one for us. Even someone like myself who, I'm looking to make wholesale buys in the thousands at certain times. They may have some very high limits that they place before they're going to let you get some of these quantity types of discounts and say you have to spend $10,000 with me, or you need to buy 500 units with me to trigger any of our discount pricing. But as you grow and you scale, you want to keep those numbers into account, because what you're doing today might not be what you're doing 6 months from now or a year from now. I always ask them if they offer discounts for paying up front, and this I've been very successful with. It's also a great way to get them to be more comfortable offering you terms in the future. When you're saying paying up front, remember you can pay on a credit card. I always advocate that people pay on credit cards. You will think when you walk away from shows like this that you're always going to receive pristine product that's coming direct from the manufacturer. The reality is going to be that sometimes, especially if you're buying closeouts, you might not end up with all Amazon new specific types of items. And if you don't have a credit card, you may have to jump through a lot of hoops to get your money back. You want to have that flexibility to be able to do a chargeback. Yes, you may need to eat some freight costs, but it's better than getting 50 units of something that's in used condition. You want to talk with them a little bit about if they are selling items, what's the difference between a case pack and a master pack? So, you know, what'll happen a lot of times is, let's say you're buying a particular toy. They will put 6 of these toys into something called a case pack, and then they will put 6 of these case packs into something called a master pack. So they may say, I need you to buy a certain quantity of master packs or a certain quantity of case packs. And you want to be sensitive to some of those numbers, right? Because you're still trying to calculate what your all-in investment going to need to be in these particular areas. Another thing that you want to talk about, and this is, again, something a little bit more specific to clothing and shoes, but are they open stock or are they, again, case pack? Now, in this instance, open stock basically means I have a whole bunch of different sizes of a particular type of shoe, and I want to buy 3 size 5s, 8 size 6s, 10 size 7s, so on and so forth. With a case pack, what ends up happening is they'll say, I sell certain sizes and certain quantities of certain sizes together. So if you want to buy this particular sandal, you're going to get 3 size 6s, 4 size 7s, 4 size 8s, 4 size 9s, and 3 size 10s. And then they might have another case pack, which is a little higher in terms of the sizes, but you can see obviously that's going to again kind of have an impact on, you know, how you're going to evaluate those particular product opportunities. The last thing that I forgot to mention is, do they have any items on closeout? This is kind of in that same discount vein, but remember, closeout items are things that they are selling limited quantities at a limited price. And for us, that creates a really good opportunity for us to cultivate a relationship with a vendor if they're a little bit hesitant on opening up a wholesale opportunity for us. But also, it's a really good chance for you to get a competitive advantage because you know if I'm buying a closeout item and they're only going to have 200 of these going into the market at this price point, and you buy them all, it's going to be really difficult for someone else to compete with you unless somehow there's some other stock that's floating around in the marketplace. So, you know, you're doing all of this, again, to try and pre-filter. So in between your app, in between maybe some of your scanning, in between just putting that brand into Amazon, we're trying to focus and hone in on, you know, for me, it's someplace in the ballpark of I want to consider 3 to 5 listings per vendor, right? And then I start to really do my homework, and I'm normally only buying max so far 3 different types of items from a new vendor. Now, if it's something like shoes, that doesn't mean that I'm not buying a lot of different sizes or a lot of different color variations. But what I do recommend that people do is, you know, you're at the cusp of building a business relationship, and you wouldn't give somebody $1 million right off the bat. You want to start a little bit slower. You want to make sure that this is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. Are they delivering the quality of items that you would expect at the price points that you'd want within the time frames that you'd expect before you throw tens of thousands of dollars at them to get in these really bigger, more robust sort of opportunities. So now let's take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about how do you sell yourself to a vendor? Because some people will be very open to you selling on Amazon, like I said, and they'll basically open up the gates to you and say, what do you want? Here are our terms. Here are our deals. Please let me know what you'd like to buy. Other people might be a little bit less willing to sell items to you. So the 2 things that I'll mention that have been really successful strategies for me in this vein have been, the first thing is around map pricing. So this works either with other items that are being sold through other third-party sellers, but also this has been a huge avenue through which I've actually been able to get on some listings that Amazon has kind of screwed a vendor over. Vendors want to make sure that they can maintain a certain premium for their products. And while we are predominantly concerned with how those items are being sold on Amazon, you need to remember the e-commerce world is a relatively new, within the last decade and a half, of an opportunity that's really developed in the marketplace. Most of these vendors have long-term, well-developed relationships with retail stores. And they don't want to know that the shoe that I'm selling for 20 bucks is selling at $50 at the retail stores, because then, as you can imagine, the retailers would be very unhappy with those particular vendors. That's why they create these MAP, and MAP stands for minimum advertised price. And you just want to be sensitive to understanding, how are people doing in terms of managing around MAP pricing? When you find out that they might have some struggles with MAP pricing, this is, again, a great way that my phone has come to save me. They'll say, oh, no, we have no issues with that. And I pull up the listing and I say, look, here's 3 sellers that are selling below the MAP pricing that you have on this particular listing. What's the deal with them? Is there some reason that they're allowed to do that? Or many vendors know that Amazon just does whatever they want to do. And this is Amazon's playground for their purposes, and Amazon will price things considerably lower than MAP. If I'm willing to enforce their MAP, help them know when other sellers are ignoring their well-established policies, and if I'm willing to preserve that price and Amazon is not willing to preserve that price, a lot of times that's an opportunity for them to cultivate a relationship with me. Now, you have to be willing to sell all that and show them all of that, right? So part of this is also going to be doing this more than once, because the first time you have this conversation, it's going to feel a little awkward. Second time, it'll get a little better. By the 100th time, you'll be able to do this with your eyes closed. I'm not at my 100th time yet, full disclosure. But, I'm getting better. The other thing I think that's really important about getting hesitant vendors to yes is understanding the different ways that they can sell to you and the types of products that they can sell to you. So the biggest divide that I've found is selling me a closeout and establishing a long-term wholesale account with me are 2 separate and distinct exercises in the minds of many vendors. But if I manage a closeout well and I buy a large quantity and I sell through it, I'm still at a better advantage than the person who is just sending them an email, because I've met them face to face. They already know that I can pay and I can afford to make some of these quantity buys. Maybe they know that I'm the type of seller who is helping to adhere to their MAP pricing. And remember, MAP pricing in a lot of ways is for everyone's best interest, because if you know you can sell an item at X and you can buy an item at Y and things will actually sell at X, you have a really good opportunity to be able to predict the amount of return you should be able to generate on a particular SKU of product. So those are the 2 really effective ways that have worked so far for me when I found that vendors have been a little bit hesitant to sell to me. The other one thing that I will say is, and this is something that I haven't experienced so much myself, but since, again, I'm going to these shows and I'm going to these shows with other sellers, you're going to find that the same people work the same shows. So things can change for them. I was able to set up a really great wholesale account with this medical shoe supplier who historically did not want to sell to any Amazon sellers. But since the couple of folks who I went to this last show with had been talking to these guys for the last year and a half or so, they were now a known commodity and they were now willing to entertain this opportunity. So, when someone says no, still get their business cards. Send them a courteous message on the back end. And when you see them again, take the time to remember what their name might have been, right? And if you know that you saw Sally the last time, you go up and you say, hey, Sally, that's going to be more impressive than, the person who has no background or no history with that particular individual. The next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is power in numbers. So there's really three things that I wanted to talk about here. So when you think about numbers, one of the things that becomes really important is, and in wholesale, you'll find the larger the position you're willing to take, or the more money that you're willing to invest, the more opportunities that will offer you with that particular brand. So, things that you may experience are huge quantity type discounts when you're willing to pay $10,000 for something. Or if you have a lot of money to invest, you can buy out all of the particular stock that's available for a closeout and know that you're going to have a degree of exclusivity on those types of items. Remember, this doesn't always have to be just you, right? That's power in numbers doesn't necessarily just equate to your bank account. At this last shoe show I went to in New York City, in collaboration with two other sellers, we bought out about 500 units across multiple sizes of this particular type of shoe. I couldn't have afforded all of that myself, but I would rather go into a deal with these guys who I know have a vested interest in maintaining maps so that they can generate a certain type of return than potentially only buying 200 units and then who knows who will come in and buy the rest. And they might not want to play nicely in the sandbox. So, you have that opportunity to kind of wheel and deal a little bit. And if you do that, you're now kind of living in this shared risk, shared reward model. There is no guarantee that they will, honor the map pricing. And you're not allowed to talk about exactly what you're going to price something at. That's called price collusion. It's illegal. Don't do it. But the beauty of map is it's something that the vendor has prescribed, and if it's commonly available. So if everyone has sort of a understanding that, we're going to try and stay competitive or at least at map pricing, that's not price collusion. That's something that is completely kosher because that's what the vendor wants people to do for their particular products. But you cannot say, if map is 25, we're all going to list our product at $30 because we still want to be able to make more money. It might happen, but you can't overtly say those things. And don't think that the FBI won't check your Facebook messages, or if you use Slack or any other communication medium. This is a big deal. You don't want to go down that road. The only thing that you really should be talking about relative to price, if you're doing any group buys, is map. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about what are the things that you should be doing after a show to make sure that you got the most bang for your buck. Okay? So hopefully when you've gone to a show, you've made some deals and you've created some opportunities for you to get some new products into your catalog. You want to make sure you tuck and tie all of the details with those particular deals. Maybe you need to provide them with some business documentation or your payment information, or they want to get a chance to glance at your Amazon store. You've done 90% of the work at that point. Get yourself over the finish line and make sure that you're actually going to have the opportunity to get those products into your catalog. The other thing that you want to do, I think, as it relates to kind of making those deals is understand what the next step might be in your relationship. So a lot of times what vendors will do is they're going to create certain thresholds for you for the first time that you buy from them. For example, I need you to buy 4 different products and spend a certain amount of money in total. But after you've made that first buy, a lot of times the relationship has changed and you're a known commodity to them. So they're now going to say, you can buy whatever you want at whatever prices you want. Or they might say something a little bit different, but understand, now that we've kind of begun developing this relationship, how might that mean things can change for us in the future? The next thing that you want to do is you've probably built up a fairly large set of contacts. So you're going to have a lot of business cards. Take a few minutes, and whether you use a Google Doc or a Rolodex or whatever your method is, you need to be keeping track of these people because, like I said, you will see them again and again and again if you start to get more into the trade show circuit. So, put all their information in the spreadsheet so you know their name, email, phone number. And what I like to do is I send them just it's pretty much a form communication, but, thank you for your time. I really appreciated having the opportunity to talk with you. I look forward to, if we are going to do some business together, cultivating a long-term business relationship. If not, you can throw in some details about how you're really excited about the brand. If anything were to change and they're open to building a relationship with e-commerce sellers, to reach out to you. But you want to take advantage of the fact that you've met this person face-to-face, because even though the direct benefits of developing those relationships might not be clear to everyone today, I can tell you in the long term, leveraging those relationships is going to be one of your best pathways to success in the wholesale market. One more thing just to remind people on when you are making your payments, pay via credit card. That is the best way to protect yourself. You can always do a chargeback with your credit card company. I've had to do this with American Express on items that I bought, and I don't know how big of a headache it would have been if I had paid by a check or paid via my debit card. So I'm a big advocate for using your credit card responsibly and using it to have yourself have some types of protections. The other big thing I think that you can do in terms of following up after a show is, remember, you're going to have this long list of all of the different vendors that are there, and you might not have had the chance to hit up every single one of those vendors. So now's a great opportunity to reach out to those people that you didn't get a chance to talk with maybe and ask for their catalog, right? If you're at a one-day show, a lot of times you can't do a very detailed set of analytics. There's tools like Scan Power Evaluate, and there are others out there that'll let you, if they have an electronic version of their catalog, churn through huge bits of data and identify the winners relatively easily. But you need to have that wholesale catalog before you can do any of those things. So reach out to some of those other people. It's kind of like cold call. And introduce yourself again. Disclose that you're an Amazon seller. Tell them that you'd like to take a look at some of their product offerings and try and build that relationship virtually. You can build a relationship virtually. A lot of people have been very successful doing this. I love building relationships face-to-face, but I'm not going to shy away from doing something via the computer or via the phone. So think about all those people who you didn't get a chance to talk to and reach out to them. Worst comes to worst, they're less than enthusiastic, and then maybe for the next show you go and you try and pick this person up face-to-face. And really, I think that's a very key point, even for folks who might not be able to go to a show, and I understand this is one of the things that people love to do actually at ASD. When you sign up for ASD, you get access to that list of all of their vendors. You ask for their catalogs, you ask for their contact information, and then you start to do your homework and go through and vet and identify what items that they have that are going to be profitable. The vendor list is a huge potential source of valuable information to you. If any of you guys have already tried going into the wholesale market, Google may be your friend in some ways, but Google does not open you up to all of the different opportunities that do exist out there. So you want to make sure that if someone is giving you the ability to access hundreds, if not thousands of vendors in one place, and give you a list of all of those people, that you're taking and using that to your advantage. So we just went through a lot. Do folks have any specific questions about anything that we've talked about so far? I'm looking to kind of open this up to Q&A and get some feedback on other things that you guys might want to cover.
Do you find that most of the shoes at the trade show were already on Amazon, or most of them aren't? Because I never looked at shoes at trade shows before.
So a bit of both. That's why I like to ask the vendors what their flagship products are, or their most popular products, or their discounted products. If something has a proven sales and price history, that's always more attractive to me than me having to build a listing from scratch. But don't always shy away just if something isn't listed on Amazon. You can create a listing and be very successful with certain types of categories, and that's when you want to use a thing like merchant words to say, what's the right way if I want to sell an off-shoulder top? What are going to be the words that are important that I include as keywords that I can get some just generic traffic to that listing, or I can make campaigns around that listing. So pretty hit or miss, but like I said, if they have 1,000 products and they're a well-established company, there's a very strong likelihood that some of those products are going to be made available already on the Amazon marketplace. And that's where you want to start in terms of figuring out, hey, are they selling them? Is Amazon selling them? Is there a huge cluster of third-party sellers already on this listing? And is there really an opportunity for me?
And if it was for shoes, do you only do brand name?
No,
Do you know anyone that's brought in like a non-brand, non-popular brand shoe to Amazon and was successful?
I do. So this is going to depend on the type of shoe in a lot of instances, right? So the sneaker market, for example, is challenging to get into if you are not a well-known brand. But there are types of shoes that customers are a little less brand sensitive. If you do some types of baby shoes, people are very aesthetically sensitive in those cases. And if they like the style, they might not care about the brand that's being sold. Sandals or seasonal things are another example of something, right? In general, if you are looking to bring something new into the market, though, a really good guiding principle is to think about starting a little bit smaller at first. You don't need to get 10,000 units of something right from the get-go. You want to make sure that it's got legs and that it's going to be able to compete in the marketplace, because if you're looking to sell on Amazon, we need to find ourselves in the buy box. And if you want to be competitive on Amazon, you need to be, with a new listing, in the first or second page of search results, preferably the first page of first results within the first 5 products that are returned for these generic search terms. So take all of those things into account. So Lisa just put a great comment into it, which is asking for pricing on things before the show and getting their catalog if you can. You do that, you run it through something like Scan Power Evaluate, and that way, you know that these are the 4 varieties of shoes that I've got a damn good chance of making some money on. And what I'll add to that is, if you know that you've got 4 different styles of shoes that you're interested in, you're now in a very different bargaining position than you would be if you were just going in and saying, I don't know what I want, but I want to buy something from you. You have leverage, and leverage is going to be key for you in the long term. And it's going to help you steer the conversation a little bit more. Vendors want to sell you stuff. Remember that. And if you're a little new, you might feel like that they're pressuring you a little bit at different points in time and saying, this is one of our most popular shoes. We don't care if it's very popular, if it's not turning over at the right frequency and making us the right amount of money per unit in Amazon. All the rest of that can be great for them, but it's not going to be great for us. So, that's a great point, Lisa. Information is power, and the more that you arm yourself with information, the better you're going to feel and the more comfortable you're going to be when you're having these conversations with these vendors face-to-face. Any other questions from people? Thoughts, comments, feedback? All right. So if no one else has any other questions, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the session for tonight. I hope that this was helpful for everybody. If you haven't done a trade show yourself, I do want you to, take some of this stuff into account and let me know how it goes, right? I'm not a trade show expert yet. I've done a handful of them, but I will tell you I'm getting better and better and better every single one of these shows that I go to. I definitely haven't made it out to ASD yet. I do want to go to ASD. That is not one of those places that requires you to have invoices. It's open to everybody, and it's absolutely huge. So you will get overwhelmed going into it, but it's one of the greatest places that you're going to find yourself a lot of different types of opportunities. So thanks for hanging out on this Thursday night. We'll have this sucker recorded, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me a message offline, and we'll take it from there. Thanks, guys.